Max Verstappen, the four-time world champion, the most dominant driver of his generation, the man who won 56 races in 4 seasons and turned Red Bull into the most feared team in the paddock. There are real, legitimate questions right now about whether he finishes the 2026 season. Lewis Hamilton, the 7-time world champion, the most decorated driver in the history of this sport, the man who left Mercedes for Ferrari in the move nobody saw coming, and who arrived at Maranello with everything to prove. He is struggling. His car is struggling, and the people around him are starting to ask uncomfortable questions about whether this chapter ends the way he wanted it to. Fernando Alonso, 2-time world champion, 44 years old, still on the grid, still fighting, still the most stubborn competitor in the history of Formula One, and still without a contract for 2027. 3 champions, 3 completely different situations, and one question sitting underneath all of it that nobody in the paddock wants to say out loud. What happens to Formula One if all 3 of them are gone at the same time? Subscribe to F1 Race Report right now, because this conversation is not going away. Let's start with the one that feels most urgent, because the Verstappen situation is not speculation dressed up as news. There are real things happening inside the Red Bull garage and inside Max Verstappen's head that make his future in Formula One genuinely uncertain in a way it has never been before. The 2026 regulations have not been kind to Red Bull. 3 races into the new era, and the team that dominated 2022, 2023, and parts of 2024 is not where it expected to be. The new power unit regulations completely reshuffled the competitive order, and Red Bull's Honda partnership, the engine relationship that carried Verstappen to 4 championships, is gone. They are now running Ford-backed powertrains, and the performance gap to the front has been painful to watch for a fan base that got very used to seeing that RB car at the front of every grid. Verstappen himself has been vocal, not in the careful, media-trained way that most drivers manage their public frustration, in the direct, unfiltered way that has always defined him. He and Norris spoke publicly after Japan about the power unit's influence on racing in 2026. His frustration with the direction of the sport, the energy management, the closing speed problems, the feeling that the best driver does not always control their own destiny, is not new. It has been building. And here's the part that matters most. Verstappen has always said his motivation is winning, not racing for the sake of racing, not collecting appearances, winning. If Red Bull cannot give him a car capable of winning in 2026, the question is not whether he gets frustrated. The question is how long that frustration stays inside the garage before it becomes something else entirely. He has options outside Formula One. He's made that clear. And he's not the kind of man who stays somewhere out of loyalty when the results stop coming. This is not a driver throwing a tantrum. This is a 4-time champion asking whether the sport he dominates is still the sport he wants to be in. That is a completely different and far more serious thing. Now let's talk about Lewis Hamilton, because the Ferrari move was supposed to be the storybook final chapter, the greatest driver of all time joining the most iconic team in the history of the sport. Scuderia Ferrari, the red car, Maranello, everything that Hollywood would design if it were writing the ending of a Formula One career. 3 races into 2026, and it's not going to plan. Ferrari have not been competitive at the front of the field the way anyone expected. Hamilton is a driver who has spent his entire career demanding the best machinery and delivering on it. He came to Ferrari because he believed they could build him a championship-winning car under the new regulations. The new regulations are here. The championship-winning car has not arrived with them. Hamilton is 40 years old. He's not running out of talent, he's running out of time. And there's a specific kind of pressure that comes with being Lewis Hamilton at Ferrari in the final years of your career that no other driver on the grid has to manage. Every race weekend, the weight of expectation is enormous. Every race weekend that ends without a podium is framed as evidence that the move was a mistake. He's been public about his frustrations too. The FIA took action on what was described as Hamilton being out of sorts at the Japanese Grand Prix. His team-principal relationship, his car setup direction, his comfort in the new machinery, all of it is under a microscope in a way that would break most people, and that Hamilton has always managed better than anyone. But managing scrutiny and actually having the tools you need to win are two different things. Right now, Ferrari is not giving him the second one. If 2026 ends without a genuine title challenge, the conversation about whether Hamilton lines up on a 2027 grid becomes very serious very fast. And unlike previous seasons where the answer felt obvious, right now it does not. And then there's Fernando Alonso, who deserves his own conversation because his situation is the most quietly dramatic of the three. Alonso doesn't have a contract for 2027. He's 44 years old. He's still at Aston Martin, a team that has not delivered the front-running car that was promised when he signed. Lawrence Stroll has invested enormous resources into Aston Martin. The results in 2026 have not reflected that investment in the way anyone planned. And Alonso, who has always been the kind of driver that makes teams better simply by being there, is watching another year tick by without the championship that his talent has always deserved and never received. Here's what makes Alonso different from Verstappen and Hamilton in this conversation. Verstappen and Hamilton both have something left to chase, a fifth title, a Ferrari championship, something that justifies getting back in the car. Alonso has already done everything. 2 world championships, wins at Monaco, wins at Monza, Le Mans, Indianapolis, a career so complete that his legacy is already locked regardless of what happens next. When you have nothing left to prove and your team is not competitive and your contract runs out at the end of the year, slow, impactful. What exactly is the argument for coming back in 2027? Alonso never needed sympathy. He won't look for a seat out of desperation. If Aston Martin can't hand him a genuine title contender, he'll walk. And unlike most drivers on the grid, walking away from Formula One at this point would diminish not a single thing he has achieved. Here's the question that sits underneath everything we just talked about. What does Formula One look like without Verstappen, Hamilton, and Alonso on the same grid? These three drivers are not just names in a championship standings. They are the reason millions of people around the world set an alarm at 3 in the morning to watch a race live. They are the rivalry, the history, the narrative. The sport has spent years building a global audience on the back of personalities and storylines that these three men sit at the center of. Remove all three at once, and you have a grid full of genuinely talented young drivers: Antonin, Norris, Piastri, Bearman, who have not yet had the time to build the kind of global recognition that carries a broadcast deal and fills a grandstand. The 2026 regulations were supposed to reset the competitive order and make the racing better. 3 races in, they have produced a 50G crash at Suzuka, a debate about whether drivers can trust their closing speeds, and the 3 most famous people in the paddock all navigating situations that could end their time in the sport. That's not what the FIA planned when they wrote the rulebook. The regulation review that follows Bearman's crash needs to be about more than closing speeds and energy deployment parameters. It needs to be about whether the sport is giving its biggest stars a reason to stay. Because right now, for the first time in a very long time, that answer is not obvious. Drop your take in the comments. Which of the 3 do you think is most likely to leave Formula One before the end of 2026? And what does the grid look like without all 3 of them on it? Subscribe to F1 Race Report for this conversation every single week. Like the video, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you at Miami.